Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Santigold, finally, titled 99 Cents. So here's a piece of an argument that I really can't stand. Well, it's obviously better because he or she did it first. The idea that something is inherently superior because the creator might have been the one to imagine it or realize it before anybody else did. Now I get the principle behind this argument. You could argue that building off of an established sound or idea requires less work than inventing something brand new, but it also can discount when an artist takes an established foundation in a direction that even the original artist never could. But in the case of Santigold, however, it might be one of the rare cases when you can see the ripple effects of her music spanning over the past several years of modern pop, where she was just ahead of the punch. She did it first, and oftentimes it was better. She started off as the frontwoman of the punk band Stifle, which released 2 albums in the mid-2000s, but by the time she dropped her solo debut Santigold in 2008, you would never know that, except maybe around the edges, as it blew through synth pop, reggae, and much of the electronic textures that would come to dominate mainstream pop for the next 5 or so years. The immediate and most common comparison is MIA, but I found Santigold to be a lot more likable, particularly because she had a great grasp of melody and tightness, and partially because her writing had a very deft touch that might not be as vibrantly scattershot as MIA, but ultimately felt more cohesive and considered. Now, I found that debut to be pretty uneven at points, and yet when she came back with Master of My Make-Believe in 2012, I'd argue it's one of the best pop albums of that year. The writing and grooves are so well realized, balancing electronic and organic amazingly well. It was an album that won me over fast. I love it to this day, even though I do think the energy kinda fades out a bit in the final songs. So in other words, after 4 years of being out of the spotlight, and with the knowledge that Santigold has a sort of forward-thinking production that could take her in a fascinating new direction, and potentially the rest of the pop music world with her, I was definitely on board to check this out. So what did we get on 99 Cents? Well folks, I've been struggling to write this review for well over a week now, partially because to this day nobody's posted the complete set of lyrics anywhere online, and partially because I really want to like this record a lot more than I do. It's not that this record is bad by any stretch. I don't think it's better than her sophomore release, but it's stronger than her debut. But the more I've listened through it, the more it found pieces that just feel underdeveloped, lacking the sort of tightness and groove that I really dug about her best work, with fewer and fewer excuses that can really be made for it. So let's start off with Santigold herself, and I'm not going to deny she's a vivacious and potent presence behind the microphone, even though the combination of vocal effects and her own delivery, she can be a little bit hard to understand at points. I wouldn't say she shows off a huge amount of emotional range on this album, with the big exception of the hook on Chasing Shadows of the Soulful and Powerful Before the Fire, which is pretty damn potent if a bit of a short song, but this is one of the rare cases where she didn't need that range in the same way. Thematically, most of this album is about making shallow plastic pop music and about being that shallow plastic pop star. And in walking the line between plastic and showing the organic soul beneath it, Santigold really nails that balance. She pulls it off. It also helps that in a lot of her instrumentation and production, it's very varied and colorful, but falls into an interesting area for me. Simultaneously very garish and in your face, but with a muted, unsettling eeriness that creeps around the edges. Darkness kept out of sight until it can't be concealed anymore. Now to create this feeling, Santigold brings in a collage of elements and producers that mostly work, from the gummy blasts of synth that explode all over Can't Get Enough of Myself or Banshee, to the warping, odd tones on Who Be Lovin' Me, most of which get a lot chillier and darker against tracks like the trap beat of Walking in a Circle, or the killer early 80s gothic chill of Rendezvous Girl, or that bass-heavy patter of Outside the Wall, which picks up this frigid synth against a distant repeating guitar lick. Those sort of guitar tones have always felt the most out of place on Santigold albums, I'll admit that. I guess it's a leftover from her punk days. It does lend some unique personality, but it doesn't always fit. But I'm also not gonna lie that I do end a pretty sweet ramshackle vibe on songs like the bass-driven Who I Thought You Were, that eventually closes out this album. And then there are the piano-driven songs like Chasing Shadows, which reminds me way too much of Santigold doing a take on Vampire Weekend Step, or the colder bongos accented hollowness of Before the Fire, which somehow gets even icier in the minimalist bass-heavy patter of Run the Races. It might be the closest this album gets to a modern pop song, featuring overdubbed vocals and more percussion over melody, unfortunately. But really, with rare exception, I actually really liked a lot of the production on this album, and with the exception of a few songs running longer or shorter than they probably should, most of this does exactly what good pop music should: stick in the brain with a lot of real personality. And now all that's left for this record to do is that it actually says something, and where it probably frustrates me the most. The first thing you'll notice is that while there are songs that seem to fall towards self-empowerment anthems to the point of being borderline ego trips, it becomes very quickly apparent that it's all kind of tongue-in-cheek, especially as you get to the much darker mid-section of the album, where it highlights the increasingly hollow and ephemeral cycle of modern pop creation. Artists who squabble to get a crown that'll only last a few years at most. I would say it gets close to satire in terms of the self-awareness, utilizing the pop music form to comment on pop music, but Santigold is taking a slightly more nuanced approach because she doesn't demonize it, as she acknowledges how she plays on the outskirts of that system, having never quite broken through, and yet she has chosen to remain a part of that commodification, part of that system. Furthermore, tracks like Chasing Shadows do highlight how she finds a certain permanence in the creation of her art. Markers in time that can mean more like any other kind of art. It actually has that still meaning for it, even if it is just pop music. If anything, Santigold takes more issue with the infighting and incessant bitchiness that comes from a fight with such hollow stakes, which leads probably to my biggest issue with the album. Because while there are songs that make some great commentary and hold the balance between burying pop and praising it, the worst tracks are when the balance tips entirely one way or the other. I like some of the ideas behind Outside the War, but considering how the instrumentation didn't really evolve beyond that basic pattern, it's a paranoid snapshot that can feel jarringly out of place with the rest of the record. But on the other hand, tracks like Big Boss, Big Time Business, and Who Be Lovin' Me, the latter with ILOVEMAKONNEN's barely on key droning show pop bragging that just feels as vapid as the material that Santigold satirizes on other songs. And in the latter case, the writing itself doesn't really hold up all that well, barely even trying to rhyme and feeling really a lot sloppier than it should, especially when other tracks are so tightly written and composed. She really can do better. But overall, I did like 99 Cents, even if I get the feeling that I probably should like it more. I like self-aware commentary, and Santigold's slightly more complex spin on being really inside modern pop, but it didn't really stick with me as deeply as I'd normally like. A lot of flash and color, but not a lot of deeper staying power, at least for me. And after giving it well over a dozen listens and trying to compose this review over the past week, I think I'm confident in giving it a solid 7 out of 10 in a recommendation, especially if you like the weirder but still accessible side of modern pop, because look, even if this album does speak to the commodification of modern life, it's sure as hell worth more than the 99 cents that's in its title. So in other words, definitely check this out. It's worth it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can imagine this review might be a little contentious, mostly because I liked it, but I wanted to like it more. But, that happens. I expected the 1975 review to be a lot more contentious than it turned out to be. Go figure. Anyways, if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to get them a listen. Yes, I'll be covering Kendrick, but I need more time to fully dissect it. It's a dense one. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.